We're good? Okay. Hello and welcome to our June meeting. We are a little board late today, but we do have enough for a quorum to proceed. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge two of our oncoming board members who are here with us today, Dr. Jim Ford and Ms. Kelly Pinkleton. They're back there. They waved. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it and look forward to when you join us, as board member Nathan just said, at the big kids table. So welcome. All right, first up on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at the minutes? Any questions? All right, I would entertain a motion. Move to approve. Any seconds? Second. Thank you, Mary. If no further questions, everyone who's in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye or raise your hand. So approved. Thank you. All right, we're picking up today. First, we're going to finish review of the remaining cases from our May meeting, and then we'll move into our assigned cases from our May meeting, but with a slightly different format. So for those members of the public or those watching, we will try to first look at our cases that are administratively closed. Then we will look at cases in which the review subcommittees all agree with the recommendation. And finally, we'll close out with cases in which there was either a different recommendation or additional recommendation from the board, just by way of hopefully making these a little bit more efficient. But I'll turn it over to Board Member Strickland to pick back up with the cases from the May meeting. Yep, no problem.
Sorry about the delay here. My login is not working. Get this checked out. So the first case remainder that we have here is 479. This summary of this particular case, on November 2022, the Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint alleging that on November 1st, 2022 and November 11th, 2022, an officer, quote, messed with his car, threatened him, and officer continues to harass him. The Columbus Department of Inspector General investigated the complainant's allegations, and based on the information and evidence obtained, they concluded that the officer's actions of investigating the complainant's vehicle as a possible stolen vehicle were supported by Columbus Police Department policies, procedures, and/or laws. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 1 be closed exonerated. However, also based on the review of body-worn camera footage from the officer, information and evidence obtained regarding the November 11th, 2022 incident, the investigation found evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation that he was threatened by the officer, and the officer's actions violated CPD policies, procedures, and/or laws. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 2 against the officer, which is that he was threatened, or that the officer threatened and harassed the complainant against the officer, be closed sustained. Additionally, the Columbus Department Inspector General found that the officer used profanity and exhibited unprofessional behavior towards the complainant during the incident on November 11, 2022, and that is a violation of CPD policies and directives. Again, allegation 1 of the CPD messing with the complainant's car was actually indicated as exonerated, but allegation 2 of the officer threatening and harassing the complainant was recommended to be closed sustained. Our subcommittee agreed with the the Department of Inspector General recommendations here, and would move to approve the recommendation of allegation 1 exonerated and allegation 2 sustained for case number 479. I'd like a motion to approve that.
Any seconds?
And, yep.
Any questions?
I'll just say another kind of discussion point. Part of this here, it wasn't listed in the initial summary, but this is part of another situation in which someone was on special duty assignment, so there wasn't a requirement to wear body-worn camera footage, but our subcommittee talked about just the need to make that recommendation. We'd like to make that recommendation. So that's just an additional point that I wanted to add. I know we're kind of separating recommendations and the actual case, but I did want to put that out there for discussion.
We had several cases last month in which we made that same recommendation.
Yep. Any other questions? And so we still do have that open as a recommendation that's been sent over for looking at the policies regarding both special duty officer, but also other officers who don't have that requirement as well.
May I ask, I don't know, Chair Burns, or if the IG knows, is the current issue a function of, just practicality, the length of time that the battery works for the body-worn camera? Or is the current issue, I guess I'm asking, what are the obstacles in the way of immediately moving towards having body-worn cameras for the off-duty officers? Is it, does this need to work through their collective bargaining agreement? Is this a problem with that, or is it simply a practical problem, or do we know what the issue is?
Madam Chair, what I would say is that this is a great question. It is a conversation that I've had with the chief. I would say that it would be better for the chief or for her to send a representative here to discuss that. I don't know if it's an issue with policy, more or less, with the equipment, the availability of the equipment, and the cost to, for the officers that are doing special duty, which are not necessarily actively working, it's a special assignment, whether or not they have the equipment to continue to do that. But I would think that would be a question for the chief of police or for one of her representatives to come to the board and speak on that.
That would be wonderful. I know we're doing these cases, Madam Chair, but we certainly had other questions for the chief and the representative in terms of reporting back and this question. So it would be great to have an opportunity to have that interaction.
We'll see if we can pose specifically the body-worn camera issue to the chief to see if somebody can come and talk at our next meeting. If not available for July, then maybe August. And then if there are, what I think would probably be good is if we have other topics specifically, we should probably put those in a package together and ask the chief to come prepared to talk about them. Yep.
I would like to add to that, too, not just off-duty police officers, but we've had a couple of cases where there were detectives involved, and we really could not tell what really went on because they were not required to wear a body-worn camera. So it's just basically taking one's word for something against another person's word, when I thought the whole reasoning why we were going to body-worn cameras is so we would have something definitive to look at in certain cases. So I would like to add that to it, too, when it comes to discussing about the body-worn cameras.
Yep, I think we can do that. Any other questions for Board Member Strickland before we vote? None? Okay, so it's been We've been motioned. We've got a second already from Board Member Nathan. All in favor, please raise your hands. All right, thank you.
The next is case 534. And again, just as a reminder, the way that some of these were set up is that some have shorter summaries and some have longer summary. This is one that has a little bit more of a longer summary, but just as I know that the Inspector General's office has had in recent memos, kind of their shorter, succinct summaries, which are helpful.
Just remember to reference the year, since you're doing some that are 22 and some that are 20.
Got it. And this is a 2022 534 0534 is the number. So in this summary, high level, police were dispatched to a scene in response to a shooting that occurred. When officers arrived to the scene, they secured the scene and established a perimeter for scene security. One of the officers approached the scene. The complainant was seen sitting a few feet away from the front door where the suspect lived while yelling at one of the other officers. One of the officers asked the officer to handcuff the complainant. The officer then approached the complainant and proceeded to handcuff her. The complainant stated the arresting officer yelled at her as they were discussing the incident, and the same officer detained her without providing insight as to why she was being detained. The complainant stated that the arresting officer did not provide his name or badge number to her, and that officers on the scene did not take a statement from her regarding filing charges against the individual who allegedly assaulted her. The complainant stated she was also dragged to the police cruiser by the arresting officer. Additionally, the complainant stated officers offered medical aid to her son, who, in parentheses, 15 years old, and her son declined. However, she feels officers should have asked her about aid being given to her son since he is a minor. Lastly, the complainant stated officers would not allow her or the caregiver for her child to enter her residence to retrieve formula for her baby, despite officers not having a search warrant on hand. In regards to allegations 1, which is that the complainant claims the arresting officer yelled at her as they were discussing the incident, and allegation 2, which is that the complainant claims the arresting officers detained her without providing insight as to why she was being detained. Allegation 4, the complainant stated officers did not take a statement from her regarding filing charges against the individual who assaulted her. Allegation 6, the complainant stated officers offered medical aid to her son, and her son declined. However, she felt officers should have asked her about aid because he is a minor. And allegation 7, which is the complainant stated officers would not allow her or the caregiver for her child to enter the residence to retrieve formula, despite officers not having a search warrant on hand. The investigation revealed that those officers' actions were in accordance with CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it's recommended that allegations 1, 2, 4, 6, and 7 will be closed with a finding of exonerated. With regard to allegations 3 and 5, which is allegation 3, the complainant stated the arresting officer did not provide his name or badge number to her, and 5, which is the complainant stated she was dragged to the police cruiser by the arresting officer. The investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegations. Therefore, it is recommended that allegations 3 and 5 be closed with a finding of unfounded. However, there was an added Department of Inspector General allegation, which concludes that the officer's comment to the complainant, quote, "You do not deserve respect when you don't treat people with respect," end quote, was a violation of CPD Directive 102. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed with a finding of sustained. All right, there's a lot there, a lot of particular allegations, but again, at a high level, allegations 1, 2, 4, 6, and 7 exonerated, allegations 3 and 5 unfounded, and an added Department of Inspector allegation of a violation here of sustained. All right. And then part of this recommendation that this report be forwarded to the Chief of Police, Columbus Division of Police, for review and consideration for disciplinary action in accordance with CPD policies and procedures and the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Columbus and FOP Capital City Lodge number 9. Subcommittee agreed with the recommendation, and I would move to make a motion to agree with the Inspector General's recommendation on complaint number 2022-0534.
I'm looking at you. Point of clarification, Ms. Ross, correct me if I'm wrong, but that last one, which was the IG prong, that'll be separate under a separate motion because it was raised by the IG's office, correct? Right, so just do the motion first on the original findings, take a vote on that, and then do the separate IG one.
Perfect. Motion on the original, I'll take a motion on the original findings of allegations 1, 2, 4, and 6 as exonerated, allegations 3 and 5 as unfounded.
So moved. All right, second. Any questions? All in favor of passing, please raise your hand. Thank you. Motion passes.
Would like to make an additional motion of a sustained Department of Inspector General allegation to case number 2022-0534 of sustained, and the recommendation that it be forwarded to the Chief of Police.
Any questions? All in favor, please raise your hands. Second motion carries. Thank you.
All right. Here we go. The next is case number 2022-0545. This is a much shorter summary. The inspector, this was a case where a complainant alleged that a CPD officer came to his residence on December 4th, 2022 and did not have on a badge. The complainant's neighbors called police and alleged that he was calling them names. The complainant alleges that the responding officer was rude and treated him awful. The Department of Inspector General retrieved a preliminary investigation report and also reviewed the computer-aided dispatch report and body-worn camera footage from the responding officer. And there was no evidence to substantiate the allegation made by the complainant that the CPD officer was rude and discourteous by asking for his ID and taking sides with the neighbors. The responding officer advised both the neighbor and the complainant to contact the prosecutor's office or CPD if any further disturbances were to occur. And so the officer's actions were appropriate and supported by CPD policies. Therefore, it's recommended that this complaint be closed with a finding of unfounded. We had no additional comments as a subcommittee and would recommend a motion to accept the Department of Inspector General's recommendation of unfounded for allegation 1 on case number 0545, 22-0545.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any seconds? Second. Any questions or discussion? We had 2 seconds. Nate. Okay. Gotcha. Do we have any questions or discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Motion passes.
Next up, we have 2022-0578. This is where the complainant stated officers were rude to her after she contacted them for assistance with her sick husband. The complainant stated she called officers after she noticed her husband was not breathing. When officers responded, they did not enter the room her husband was in until the emergency medical services arrived. The complainant alleges that the officers were rude and replied in a condescending way towards the complainant and others in the home. The complainant claims officers never walked in the room where her husband was located. They did not do anything while on the scene. Additionally, the complainant stated the officers made individuals in the home sit outside in the cold weather like it was a crime scene. After reviewing the evidence obtained and the body-worn camera footage for officers on scene, the Department of Inspector General found no evidence to substantiate the allegations. And also, the investigation found that the officers' actions were in accordance with CPD policy and/or procedure. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegations be closed with a finding of unfounded. Just a reminder, what the allegations 1 through 3 are. Allegation 1 is the complainant stated the officers were rude and disrespectful. Allegation 2, complainant stated the officers had her and others sit outside in the cold. And allegation 3, complainant stated officers never walked in the room where her husband was located and they did not do anything while on scene. And for all three of those, the recommendation was unfounded. And there were not additional comments from our subcommittee. So we would make a motion to move ahead with to accept the Inspector General's recommendation of unfounded for allegations 1, 2, and 3 for case number 2022-0578. That's the motion.
So we have it moved. Any seconds? Got it?
I got a question.
You have a question? Yes.
So the BWC showed that on each of those allegations, or each of those allegations were not true. That's what BWC showed. So having them sit outside in the cold, not entering the room and being rude and discourteous or whatever it was.
So are you saying versus like exonerated? Or?
No. What I'm saying is so that body work camera showed that what she stated, her allegations were untrue.
Yet the specific language here was that there was no evidence to substantiate the allegations, and they found that the officer's actions were in accordance with CPD policy and/or procedure. And it goes in a little bit more details, but it says it doesn't rise to the level of these allegations. And I don't know if there's further pieces there, but based on our initial review, it didn't seem from the evidence that was provided that it rose to the level.
Gotcha.
And Nate, I don't know if you saw Board Member Nathan seconded. I saw his hand. All right, any other questions or discussion? All right, all in favor of accepting the motion, please raise your hands. All right, thank you.
Is that me?
I think you're still U 23043?
Is that
or is
me?
that-
Is that on another one?
I think it's still one of the,
Is
I've
it
got.
the next?
I've got, yep, the 23 cases, 043054, 060065, 102 still left.
Okay, let me pull these up here. I didn't realize these were all
All
me.
from May, yeah, it's
Yeah.
or all from
Let me-
April.
Sorry about that. These are the April cases?
That was a typo on my part, yes.
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right, let me,
If you have them already, Board Member Strickland, if you've got them already separated according to the admin agree, disagree, we can move forward and include them in the larger discussion if that's easier.
let's, let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, no problem. Okay, so we had a discussion last month about if it's possible to consolidate some of these into single motions. So I asked everyone to arrange your cases first by administrative closures, if there were any. What I hope to be able to do is if we have those closures, we can read the case numbers onto the record. You don't have to share details if it's an admin closure, but also state the motion with the number, and then we'll vote on all of them collectively. Does that work for everyone? Okay. Does anyone have any administrative closures that were on their roster for last month? The 1 month we don't have any. There are none to batch review. Perfect. All right, moving on next to cases in which we agree, or the review committees agreed. So here is where we entered our discussion about how much information should folks share in these cases. So hopefully this is an opportunity for folks to share some of their new brevity skills. Either way, that is the set of cases we will go through next. We will start with Board Member Nathan, move to Board Member Strickland, then Board Member McIntosh on agreement cases first. Which might be all the cases, who knows, but,
It was all the cases.
yep, for our subcommittee.
Are we, we had a conversation last month about consolidating all of them together Are we in agreement that that's what we're going to be doing, or do you want a brief summary of the cases, just as Board Member Strickland just did?
So Mr. Tobias said that we are allowed to do the batches. However, just know that we might have questions about some of them. So
Sure.
I would say however much information that you'd like to include with each number, you can. And if folks have questions about any of those,
Well, if I don't give any information,
I
how
know.
will folks have a question?
precisely, yes.
Yeah, and so I think, I like the idea of consolidation, but I think thinking about that being paired with how we're doing our subcommittee reviews, because I know that it's, at least right now, it doesn't seem like all the different, because we're having separate meetings and we all have our separate times for subcommittees to meet, that it might be hard if you're an individual watching from home or the audience and you're trying to get a sense of what's going on in each of these cases. You'd have to go to each individual subcommittee meeting, which is a little difficult. At the same time, even the summaries do not provide the kind of the holistic picture of a particular case, but we've got to get a summary across. And so I'm just trying to figure out a way where, you can give the high level top line, but, if I'm somebody who is a resident of the city and wants to know what's going on with the Civilian Review Board, is there a way for me to access a top line version of these memos, like a summarized version of these memos at the city site or somewhere else, so that they could then look to that if they wanted to explore further? So that's one thing that I, wanted to also put out there, just to give people more access if they chose to, so that it doesn't seem as if we're just reading over, the substantive, complaints or things like that. So I just wanted to get some clarity on that.
As a board, you can decide however you like to review these complaints. I would just remind you that all of these records are subject to public records request. And with the matrix system, there's a variety of ways that the IG can search for a record or a series of records, everything that's filed in May or June. If someone knows of a particular complaint, like a complainant's name, they probably could search by a complainant's name. So, if the public does have an interest in a specific complaint or just wants to see generally the work of the board, they can certainly reach out to the IG and make a public records request, and that information would be shared. The other thing that I would also share is that pursuant to a public records request, the IG is not required to prepare any additional documents, create any kind of a high-level summary. It's only the records that are currently in existence. So just to be mindful of that as well.
No, that's really helpful, and I think this is something that maybe as a board and as a city, that more than just putting it on the Inspector General's office should consider, is having a database that is more accessible instead of just having to go through the public records request process, so that people can access the cases. Again, you might have this to not include personal identifying information, but if there's a way for people to access that database in the future, I would at least put that recommendation out there, because I think to Board Member Nathan's point here, if we're just reading the case numbers and that's all, then we're going to run, I think we could run into some potential issues there, even though I believe and feel that we do need to streamline this process. I agree with that 100%.
I would just say your suggestion of some additional database that's maybe public-facing that they can access, that's still subject to public records maintenance. It's personnel maintenance of that database, and it's also subject to public records request. So just be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, no, I'm just recommending it. I mean, I think I think as a best practice, you look across the country. You look in places like New York or elsewhere. You have databases, and I understand that there are different laws and state laws in terms of the way in which they operate around public records. But I do think there could be a way for us to make this more readily available for folks who want to look deeper at larger systemic issues or policy. So, but just want to put that out there.
Board Member Younger, then Board Member Tatum.
Okay. I think it's very important that the public have access to databases, but I think we also have a responsibility. The subcommittee has a responsibility to review the cases, but then we as a board have a responsibility to review the cases. And reviewing case numbers is not, I don't believe, meeting that responsibility. I think we have to review what the subcommittee does. And I think the public expects that of us in some way. Databases are good, but I think we have a responsibility to the public to review the cases.
Board Member Tatum.
I have two things. First, I'm going to go back to what you're saying. So what you're saying is that from the time we meet, we're supposed to read 30 to 40 cases.
No,
You said we're supposed to know what each committee is doing.
no, that's
What
not
were
what
you
I'm
saying?
saying.
So what were you saying?
I'm saying that we have a responsibility to read our cases
Oh,
that are
okay,
given to
our
us.
cases.
Oh,
but you-
yeah, no,
but you
no.
didn't say
no.
our cases at first, so I just want to make sure I put some specificity
Sure,
there.
sure, absolutely. No, we have a responsibility to read our subcommittee cases.
Okay, I
And
agree
meet
with
and
that.
prepare them.
I agree
And
with
then
that.
present them to the board so that they have an opportunity to give their input.
Okay.
And we have to trust each subcommittee
Yeah.
to do what they're supposed to do.
And
period.
I think the
I still
discussion,
got the floor.
I'm sorry.
I still got the floor. Because my second thing is this, in reference to what you're saying, anyone who's interested in any case has access to be able to come to any subcommittee and sit down and hear what we talk about in reference to those cases. Am I correct? So now, I don't really personally see a need to have another database, because it's still all open to the public. And we've had people come and sit in on our committees that were interested in certain cases. They sat down and they listened, they took their notes, whatever. So I just think we're creating another beast, as far as I'm concerned, when we do that, or something else that we may have to maintain or something. And I'm not for that. I'm just not for that.
I would just briefly on that is, I just don't think it's the most accessible to, if somebody's interested in what the board is trying to discuss and understand, for them to have to go to 3 separate subcommittee meetings and then also potentially see a full board meeting in order to know the result of a particular case. So that's why it just seems like there are a lot of steps there that make it hard for somebody to kind of see and tune in on what's going on. There's a couple other options you could make on that. You could have larger subcommittee meetings and less meetings in between, or we could also talk about ways to put this database together. But I just want to put that up.
Okay.
Board Member Nathan.
Yeah. The only thing in response to Board Member Younger's statement is, I think we were in agreement that what we want to do is streamline the process, but, have enough conversation that there's, a credible review. We can't credibly review numbers, but we were taking, several minutes per case or more. And with 30 cases, that's about all we're not able to get through all of that in the, amount of time we've allocated for this civilian review board. So we want to find that happy medium. I just think we're, if we just attempt to streamline and see if we're happy with that, we've been able to tinker along the way. There's not that many of us, so we can perhaps try this time to have brief summaries, see if that works, if we're happy with the amount of information we have and the amount of conversation we're able to generate, and then go back and, is that working? I would be supporter of Board Member Strickland's recommendation personally. It is very difficult to access the information if we're traveling around the city. The ability to be able to know what's happening with the case or what's happening with the civilian review board that got a lot of attention in light of some of the problems we were having. This is an issue of real public interest. And so the ability to know what's going on is important. But would you like me to proceed?
Yeah, I would just say, I would encourage, probably from a balance perspective, I think administrative closures, we can throw numbers out
Yes.
and
Yes.
dismiss
Totally.
those.
I'm in.
I think for the rest, though, I'd like to see us try to boil down our summaries
Yes.
to a paragraph,
Yep.
right?
Very
Instead of 5. And then if based on those,
Sure.
statements, if folks have questions, absolutely, this is the place to discuss it.
Great.
Or if we need a hearing, because our discussion is going on 45 minutes for one case, and we realize that we're not coming to consensus. But I agree that hearing something is better than just reciting the numbers. So, and maybe that can be, even though we've got a committee chair for each committee, maybe we need a committee scribe for each
There you
committee
go.
to type up
That-
those very short, succinct things that then get stated at these meetings. So with that, I will turn it back over
All right.
to Board Member Nathan.
So this is case number 197. The complainant alleged that the CPD refused to find that an individual had parked on their property had trespassed. In this instance, the evidence from the body-worn camera suggested that the person who parked on the property had been invited by a tenant. So regarding allegation 1, the Inspector General found that to be, the officer to be exonerated. Also, that CPD was rude and disrespectful, that was unfounded, and according to body-worn camera, in fact, the complainant was angry and belligerent. So I move in case number 197 to accept the Inspector General's recommendation of exonerated as to allegation 1 and unfounded regarding allegation 2.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
This is case number 199. In this case, the complainant alleged that the officer failed to do their job because they didn't arrest or cite a person who hit their car. And secondly, that the officer raised their voice and screamed at them. The Inspector General found that there was no cause to arrest the person and that the CPD had followed policy. So as to allegation 1, they were exonerated. Regarding allegation 2, they did yell, but the Inspector General found the yelling was not to be rude, but to be heard since the complainant was yelling. The yelling did not involve anything derogatory, rude, discriminatory, or offensive. And so regarding allegation 2, that allegation was found to be unfounded. So I move in case number 199 to accept the Inspector General's recommendation of exonerated regarding allegation 1 and unfounded regarding allegation 2.
It's been motioned. Any seconds? Any questions?
This is case number 207.
Yes, yeah.
These
they're
are all
2023.
23, yes.
Yep.
Otherwise, I would have, yeah.
We didn't. I'm sorry, I'll save the votes for the end of his group, but we do have a motion in a second on that one. Go ahead, Pastor.
Did we vote?
We didn't vote. I'm
Okay.
going to save yeah, since they're all agreements, I'm just going to hold the motions open until you're finished, and then we'll vote.
On all of them?
Yeah, because they're all the
Okay.
same.
Good, okay. So this is case number 207. The complainant alleged that the officer ran a red light, causing her to have to slam on her brakes to avoid a collision. The Inspector General found the police car was in the area, but there was no body-worn camera or other corroborating evidence. The officer didn't recall running the red light or witness any car slamming on their brakes. The finding is inconclusive. It was simply an allegation that was uncorroborated by other evidence. And so I move in case number 207 to accept the Inspector General's findings of, in this case, inconclusive.
Any seconds?
Second.
Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Is this a case in which there can be further investigation or?
I think the situation is such that there wasn't the, possibility of other evidence being produced. Chair Burns had some knowledge of the actual streets, and I don't know, Chair Burns, if you were able to speak to the particulars of the turns and the lights in that area.
So this is over where the police academy is. So over at Hague Avenue and 70, where, so the officer would have only had, would have been coming from the police academy outward to Hague Avenue. And so right across the street is the expressway. So you can only turn right or left here. The way, two things, because the officer wasn't going towards any call, was just leaving the academy, that's why there was no camera footage, because they weren't on a run, they were just leaving. There was no one else either in the area, the place where you have to turn to get out of those places, it's not you could just go straight through and run into this person. It has to be a turn out of the academy location, and there was nothing otherwise suggesting or that could substantiate it. So there's no place to see a camera, there's no traffic camera, there's nothing there that could give any more information than what was seen in the report.
And so, where was the complainant located? I mean, they filed a complaint.
I
Where were
could
they?
not tell where the complainant herself was, if she was getting off the expressway, if she was going, I think that runs north or south. But she basically said she had to slam on her brakes to keep from hitting this officer. And it's difficult to imagine how that would have happened based on the direction the officer said they were going.
And just for maybe the Inspector General's team, how do you get to the kind of determination of, there's not much further we can do here, it's inconclusive? Is there a kind of a timeline? Is there a resource question? I just wanted to offer that question. I don't know.
When we get a complaint like that, the first thing that we are going to do is talk to the complainant, try to get as much information, detailed information about what they're saying. Then the other thing is we do look to see what other type of information we could support or collaborate, what their allegation would be, which would include, if there's any footage from the vehicle, from the scout car, from the officer's scout car, from the officers. There was nothing. And so in a situation like this, you just really have the complainant's complaint, their statement versus the officer's statement. And it's just not enough to make a determination as to what actually occurred. And so in a case like that, the reason we close it inconclusive is because what we're stating is that we can neither refute or support what occurred. So it becomes inconclusive.
Since there was no accident, since there actually was not any accident.
Right, and it's the perception. I mean, we don't know. We have what the perception is of what the complainant is saying. Officer, we brought the officer in. The officer does not recall anything. So there's just no evidence to really support or for us to make a determination. So we can't say it didn't occur, but we can't say it did occur. So it's just inconclusive. If we had more information, we would have been able to make a determination, but we didn't have enough information.
We've had multiple cases like this of an allegation that the officer was speeding through a school zone, speeding by a home, that sort of thing, and have been faced with the same issue. I don't know if there's a way around it if the, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with a speeding thing,
Well, I know on the car there is,
yeah, there's like GPS, so sometimes we can make we can see if the vehicle is in the area. It might give us, some information as to what the speed is, and if we're able to identify the vehicle, we can usually make a determination whether the officer was responding to a run or something like that. But in a case like this, we look at a lot of information. We will look at the GPS, we'll look at the unit history. So there's a lot of information that we do go into. But again, we only have 90 days in which to complete our investigation. So based on as much information as we can get is what we use to make a determination as to whether or not we're able to, again, reach some type of conclusion.
And
Thank-
some of these would be, like, we'd have to have cameras, like, to have a policy change that would have cameras on all the time, not just engaged when there's a run. Because I think that's where we get with some of the speeding ones especially, or like this, it's a traffic light. If there's no active run happening, then that camera on the cruiser is not engaged, and so you can't
Yeah.
see anything.
There is enough information for us, but in the case like this, the allegation is that she felt that the officer made an improper turn, and so she's stating that she slammed. We don't know. For all we know, we don't know what she was looking at. Was she distracted? You know what I'm saying? It's just not enough information for us to make a determination. The officer was in the area. He didn't recall. There was no accident that occurred. He didn't slam on his brakes or anything, which might, cause the camera to activate. But again, there was enough information that we looked at. We just were not able to make a determination, again, whether or not the incident occurred or didn't occur. So that's why we close it inconclusive.
Helpful. Thank you.
did we get a second?
Yes. I have a
Okay.
second.
This is case number 213. Complainant said that the father of her child grabbed her arm and alleged that that was domestic violence, but that the CPD officer laughed at the claim. The evidence suggests that the officer asked what happened, suggested it might not rise to the level of domestic violence, but did fill out a case report. There was no charges due to a lack of what was it? I'm sorry. There was just a lack of evidence of domestic violence. And there was no evidence that the officer laughed at her. So the Inspector General concluded that the allegation was unfounded. I move to accept the Inspector General's finding of unfounded in case 213.
We have a second. Any questions?
Case number 258, there were two allegations. One, that the officer interfered with her custody with the complainant's custody by not enforcing a custody order and letting the son go with his father. This was a case in which there was a custody dispute at a public school. The father took the son because he had a court order to do so. The CPD officer accepted the court order. There was disputes by the complainant that the court order should not have been accepted. But in this case, the officers used their best judgment. The conclusion by the Inspector General was the officer used their best judgment, relied on the most recent court order in allowing the complainant's ex-husband to take the child. There was an attempt to mediate this dispute by the CPD officer for 40 minutes before finally shutting it down and saying, we're going to allow the father to take the child. There was also an allegation that the CPD officer was rude. He did tell the complainant, we need to go now, but there was no evidence that this violated CPD policy. And so regarding the two allegations, one, that he interfered with custody, and the second, that his conduct was rude and unprofessional. The Inspector General found these allegations to be unfounded. We agree with the Inspector General's findings and move to accept the Inspector General's findings in case number 258.
Any seconds? Thanks, Mary. Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, mostly just around some of the language that was used there around, it said something about the officer used his best judgment.
Yeah.
How is that determined versus, other language that says the evidence suggests that it does not rise to the level of misconduct, or the evidence suggests the officers was aligned and actions were appropriate. I just don't know the use of the phrase best judgment. How is that a finding?
I don't know that was it was closed with a finding of unfounded.
We're saying not finding, but how is that
Because they didn't inappropriately interfere with the complainant's custody. They thoroughly examined all available, we'd have to get into the real details of the case regarding why she was alleging that that court order should not have been the controlling document, but that was what the officer was presented with. And because the court order, I think, happened just the day before, it was the most recent legal document, and the officer used their judgment and accepted it. So the specific question you're asking
is related to maybe the actual, maybe the written memo itself saying the conclusion is that the officer used their best judgment.
I think as to the accuracy of, is that document true and controlling? And the dad had the papers there, and mom didn't. Mom was just disputing that was accurate, and so that's part of why they were there for about 40 minutes reviewing it and then trying to talk through with the parents. And so the best judgment went towards the officer's decision to believe the paperwork that dad has was the most recent and most binding over which parent could pick up the kids that day from school.
Yeah, so I understand generally in terms of the officer saying I use my best judgment. I just, in terms of as an independent investigator reviewing and saying the officer used their best judgment, that was just kind of, and I don't know if that's, yeah.
So that may have been, and I'll have to find that in the report. But what I did is I pulled up exactly when we go through. We know that when the investigators are handling the investigation and they're talking to the officer, they may reference what the officer said. But looking at what the allegation and what our findings are always based on facts. And so basically what the allegation tells you, I'm just looking at the paperwork. I'm just looking at how the allegation is written. It just states that based on the information that we reviewed, the officer was able to make a determination based on the examination of all the paperwork who had custody. And I believe in this case, and I'm just kind of going back on my recollection of reading it, is that there was custody paperwork that stated that the father is allowed to get the child on these specific dates. The mother showed up and was saying no, she was trying to maybe make some changes, but what the officer did is based on the information, and he probably went with what is the most current and what is consistent with what the school was doing. That was the judgment that the officer probably, conveyed to the investigator. And that may just be what was in the report. But the reports are all based on, if you read down at the bottom when we close out what the allegations are, it always states what the facts are we reviewed to make the determination as to why the officer made the decision he made. But the decision that the officer made was based on the facts and the evidence that he had at that time. And we reviewed all of that, and we concurred that the decision that he made supported that, and he did not violate any policy or procedure, or going back to what the complainant's allegation was.
And that's super helpful, and I think that's helpful language. I think sometimes the language might, and I know it kind of varies at times, it could use what the officer is saying or use what the complainant's saying, but it's helpful to have that language where it's based on the facts, before them. And I just had a potential issue with the phrase, the officer used their best judgment, even if that's.
That was in the.
Summary?
Sorry, in the a case statement, a few lines above the conclusion, but it wasn't in there, in the Inspector General's formal conclusion.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so we have a first, second. Any other questions on that? We'll still reserve voting for the batch at the end of the Team One's case.
This is case number 276. The background is it was a very cold day, and a homeless person was sleeping in the mailroom of a building. The complainant alleged that the officers refused to ask a homeless individual who was sleeping in the mailroom foyer to leave. The complainant was a property manager, was not present at the time. A tenant came upon the homeless man and at first felt unsafe, but later said that she did not feel unsafe. The tenant spoke to the police. The tenant said that she didn't feel unsafe, that the person wasn't causing any problems. As she said, she was okay with letting him stay. The officer, in accordance with CPD policy, used discretion because of the temperature outside and allowed the homeless person to stay in the foyer, that he wasn't bothering anyone. The Inspector General found that, based upon the evidence, that the officer was exonerated and that their actions were supported by CPD policy. We accepted the Inspector General's finding and we moved to accept the Inspector General's findings in case number 276, that the officers were working in accordance with CPD policy and allowing this individual to stay in the mailroom foyer on a cold day.
Any seconds? Thank you. Board Member Younger, seconds. Any questions or discussion?
So just for clarification, the complaint was that the officer allowed somebody to stay. That was the complaint?
Yes.
Okay.
It was by the property manager who was not present.
Got it.
Was not part of the, this discussion, but found out later.
Okay, and then filed.
That the officer was allowing something on their property that they thought should be disallowed.
Got it. Cool.
This is case number 283. The complainant called CPD regarding her daughter, who suffers from mental health issues, who jumped on her, hit her, defecated through trash. It's the third or fourth incident that week, the complainant said. There were 3 allegations that the officer didn't provide their badge number according to body-worn camera footage that was found, that was concluded to be unfounded. The second allegation was that the officer was discourteous and laughed because he said that the complainant could pick up the trash herself. Again, according to body-worn camera footage, the officer did say the complainant could pick up the trash, but was not rude, nor did he laugh. And so that allegation was, the conclusion was that was unfounded. And the third allegation was that the officer refused to take a report. The officer offered to take a report. The complainant wanted the officer to do something that he couldn't do, which was file charges, because the previous incidents were not reported to the police, and the police had no basis for filing charges in this case. And so that was, the Inspector General concluded that that was unfounded as well. So in case number 283, I move to accept the Inspector General's findings of unfounded regarding the 3 allegations.
It's been moved. Any seconds? Thank you. Any questions?
This is case number 305. The complainant alleged that his wife was involved in a car accident. The driver may have been stalking her. There was no evidence that the person who was involved in this car accident had approached the complainant's wife. The officer said he could document this but couldn't report anything since there was nothing to report. He added that the complainant could file for a protection order if he felt it was necessary. There were several allegations. One, that the officer, quote, blew her off, and quote, regarding this allegation of stalking. That was found to be unfounded. And second, an allegation that the officer refused to take a report. He explained that there was no criminal violation, but he did document it. And so with respect to that, the officer was exonerated. We agreed with the Inspector General's finding regarding allegation 1, that it was unfounded, and with respect to allegation 2, exonerated. So I move to accept the Inspector General's findings in case number 305.
Any seconds? Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
This is case number 325. The background for this case was the individual was discovered to be driving without a valid license, without valid registration, and without the license plate on the car was, I think, also not valid. I can't recall.
The registration wasn't current.
The registration wasn't current. Thank you. The claim was that the complainant alleged that the officer yanked her arm. It was, according to body-worn camera, that was, the conclusion was that was unfounded. He helped her out of the car. And secondly, that he jammed her arms together so they could be handcuffed. Again, it was unfounded. Regarding the second officer, he never touched her. In fact, body-worn camera discovered that the officer was very courteous, not aggressive, and drove the complainant home to her house. And so I move to accept the Inspector General's findings in case number 325, that unfounded regarding allegation 1, that officer 1 yanked her arm. He was escorting her. And with respect to allegation 2, with officer 2, the finding of unfounded, that this officer rammed her arms together. Body-worn camera suggests that he didn't have any physical contact with the complainant.
Any seconds? Any discussion or questions?
And finally, case number 348. I'm sorry.
It's been Mary every time. No, appreciate it. Go ahead, Board Member Nathan.
Case number 348, this was a traffic, the background is it's a traffic accident, 3 allegations regarding an accident report, that the officer failed to complete a report. The Inspector General concluded with respect to allegation 1 that the officer actually did complete a report. Second allegation was that he didn't try to do anything to verify the accuracy of information on the exchange of information between the complainant and the person with whom they had the accident. The officer was exonerated. He did not, under CPD policy, have a duty to verify the exchange of information. And the third allegation is that he didn't do anything to determine if the other person in the accident was intoxicated. The Inspector General found there was no evidence to suggest intoxication, and so concluded regarding the third allegation that he should have done a breathalyzer or something. The officer was exonerated, and so I move in case number 348 to accept the Inspector General's findings of unfounded regarding the failure to complete an accident report, exonerated regarding the failure to verify the accuracy of information, and exonerated regarding the determination of whether the other person in the accident was intoxicated.
Second, we have a second from Board Member Younger. Any questions? Okay, we have pending from Team 1 motions and seconds to accept the recommendations on 10 cases total. We have no further discussion. Just questions, yes, we'll put them together. All in favor of accepting those recommendations, please raise your hand. Motions carry. Thank you. All right. Yes.
To kind of go back to one case, I had a chance to look that up. That was on case 23-258. So the paragraph in which the board member was referring to, the paragraph, what the investigator was saying is that based on the policy, the officer was attempting to mediate. That's what the paragraph was saying. It took him 40 minutes in which he was talking to the parents. So it said that the officer, in his best judgment, his intent was not to be malicious in any fashion, but to act in good faith when mediating and making a decision. So it was just saying that he was trying to use his experience to mediate talking to the parents. It wasn't involving policy or procedure, but this is probably what we do expect some of our officers to do in those situations, is to try to get the two parents to kind of come to some type of conclusion involving their child. So that's what it really was. That's what the that's what the investigator was trying to. Right, they were just trying to let the reader know that, you know, the officer wasn't just going with policy and procedure, which he was, but he took the time to try to mediate what was going on. So I just wanted to add that in there. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Chair Burns, may
Yes.
I don't know if this is appropriate now or if we should wait till we do all the cases. I just wondered if we might want to reflect very quickly, was that too much information, in our opinion, too little to be able to accomplish the task of having meaningful interaction while being able to streamline the process?
So I'll just say, I think that was great. I think the summaries, and the Department Inspector General's office has done a great job of this. The summaries are succinct for us to just read directly from, which has been helpful. Another thing that I try to do for ahead of this meeting, for not the other cases that I have to talk about, but for the last set of cases that were signed in May, was just put kind of a cover page that explains which one any cases that are closed, ones that we agree with, and anything that we disagree with, that has a summary. And then thanks to me looking at the agenda notes from Nate, making the way to talk about the allegation and the Department Inspector General recommendation just very succinct, that in the future I can try to actually provide that with every member, so that you have something to look at if you have further questions. It's not the full investigative review sheet. It's a top line that says summary, allegation, then the Department Inspector General recommendation, and then any potential notes for something that we think is warrants discussion. So that combined with a high level summary, I think could work well. But you did a great job summarizing. So
Yeah, and I will say that our subcommittee, I have a similar list of here's what the things were. So if subcommittees would like to share that information, whatever your personal notes, if it does something like that, like puts a little summary, I think that's fine. And I'd also encourage you, if you want to, you can share those with Nate, because Nate also then shares out the full things, and you can choose which part you want to comb through with each of those. But I agree, unless anybody else has anything else, I think Board Member Nathan gave a nice, succinct overview. That was probably the quickest we've gotten through 10 cases.
Impressive.
So, kudos.
It would have been quicker
Yeah.
All right, next, so still on cases in which we agree, I'll turn it over to Board Member Strickland
All right.
for your subcommittee.
I'm going to wrap up the case. So I'm going to start with case 043. We're almost at the high level overviews that I talked about, almost there, but I'm going to try my best here. These are pretty succinct summaries. This is case number 2023-0043. The complainant alleged misconduct on the part of a sworn employee of the Columbus Division of Police who was alleged to be in violation of the Department of Public Safety External Communications and Civic Engagement Policy, and is also alleged to have been insubordinate by violating this policy. After reviewing the post made by this officer, interviewing a witness named in the allegation, and the officer, the Columbus Department Inspector General concluded that the officer violated the Department of Public Safety social media policy. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation be closed sustained. Also, the officer was not found to have been willfully or intentionally insubordinate to any person higher in their chain of command as alleged by the complainant. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 2 be closed unfounded. And the specific allegation 1 was that the officer violated Department of Public Safety, External Communications, and Civic Engagement policy by using hashtags that represent the City of Columbus and or the Columbus Division of Police, namely, quote, hashtag CPD and, or end quote, and, quote, hashtag City of Columbus, end quote. That was allegation 1. Then allegation 2 is that the officer committed the act of insubordination relative to strict guidance provided by the Department of Public Safety regarding this policy. So with respect to allegation 1, they do find a violation of the Department of Public Safety social media policy because the officer used those hashtags. And then that's closed with sustained. And then allegation 2, they found that the officer did not, was found not to have been willfully or intentionally insubordinate, and therefore that allegation is closed unfounded.
You can go ahead and make your motion.
Yeah,
now,
that's,
so that way-
would like to make a motion for, to accept the Department Inspector General's recommendation.
Second.
And that's in case number 043.
May I ask, was this a member of the general public who saw the hashtags and filed a complaint because they knew that, or did they object to the officer's statements and that those statements were being associated with the police department, or why? I'm just trying to get, how did this complaint arise?
I'm not sure if the Department Inspector General has further comment on this in terms of the complaint itself or the complainant itself.
The complainant saw the post on social media. Excuse me. He saw the post on social media and immediately reported that to the Department of the Inspector General.
And was the complainant upset with the content of, that it was associated with the police department, or just that this complainant knew that this hashtag was unacceptable?
The complainant knew that this hashtag was a violation of division policy.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, we'll reserve voting for all 15 cases.
Great. Next up is 2023-054. The complainant stated that he called for officers to come to his residence because his neighbors continued to place their trash dumpsters in front of his property, resulting in the neighbors' trash being scattered over his property. The complainant stated that when the officers arrived, the officers told him that he would speak with his neighbors, but instead got back into the cruiser and left without speaking to the neighbors. Also, the complainant alleges that the officer yelled through his door for him to do something with his dog. A review of the computer-aided dispatch report, body-worn camera footage from the officer, and the statement from the complainant the Department Inspector General found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegations of officer misconduct. The allegation one was that the officers did not properly investigate his complaint by not speaking with his neighbors. And then allegation two was that the complainant alleges the officers were rude and discourteous by telling him, quote, "control your damn dog," end quote. Based on the review of the evidence, the Department Inspector General's office found no evidence to substantiate that complaint. We did make a note here, based on our subcommittee's review, that this, might be an instance where maybe another agency may have been able to respond to this situation. Like, I don't know if this is something 311 handles or another agencies, but to us, that was just kind of a note that we wanted to make. But as far as the actual allegations itself, I would just make a motion to accept the Department of Inspector General's recommendation of unfounded, or exonerated allegation 1 and unfounded allegation 2.
On case number 054. Do we have a second? Thank you.
Next, we have case number 2023-0060. The complaint alleged that on January 17, 2023, CPD officers entered and searched his residence without permission and/or a warrant. The complainant also alleged that the officers threatened to arrest him if he did not provide his name. After review of all the relevant evidence, it is recommended that both of the allegations be closed with a findings of exonerated, as the alleged actions occurred, but they did not violate CPD policy, procedure, and/or law. However, the investigation did reveal one policy violation outside of the allegations made when an officer used rude or discourteous profanity when speaking to the complainant. It is recommended that this violation, Department of Inspector General added allegation, be closed with a finding of sustained. I'm not sure how to do this part.
Yeah, I would just make them two separate.
Oh, just two separate? Okay. So, and then I will just first also make a note here. We did have a few just high level kind of a question or note, which is that, again, I don't need to know the answer today, but just in the future, what the CPD's policy is of officers speaking with minor children without parent or guardians present. The investigator indicates here that there's no particular policy about this, but I would ask if there's maybe a similar policy or law that addresses this particular matter. So I don't necessarily, it wasn't dispositive. That particular question was not dispositive based on the other evidence of what else to do here. But I just wanted to put that note out there based on, and that is just case number 0060. That's just something I would ask the office at another time to have that information that our subcommittee was wondering about. As relates to so I'd like to make a motion on case number 0060 to accept the Department of Inspector General's findings of allegation 1 exonerated, allegation 2 exonerated.
Can we have a second?
Then I'd like to make an discussion.
Do we have a second?
Oh, second.
Thanks.
sorry.
Thank you. All right.
Then I'd make an additional motion for a Department Inspector General initiated allegation 1 of one of the officers using rude or discourteous profanity when speaking to the complainant be closed with a finding of sustained.
Okay. Any other questions about that? 060? Yeah.
So I guess the conclusion is that they did have a warrant. Because I want to agree, I'm trying to, you know what I mean? So if I agree with that, then that means that they did have a warrant or somebody else gave them consent to come into the home.
And this is case number 0060. I believe, I'm not sure the specific kind of clause there in terms of how it, yeah, I'm just trying to, I'm sorry about that. I'm pulling that up too. This is from April? Sorry.
And while folks are looking that up, I'll just note, Board Member Strickland will pause at 3:30 just to take a 15-minute break. So at some point, I'll interject there.
The officers were in pursuit of the complainant's cousin. They were visually seeing and pursuing the person, which allows them to be able to enter the premises
Gotcha,
without a
gotcha.
warrant.
I was envisioning it a different way, so that's that's why I wanted a
No,
warrant.
that's helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Exigent
great
circumstances.
question.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
So we've got the motion and the seconds for both sets of recommendations are on the floor until the vote.
Cool. Now we have next is case, and I'm going to get through both these in time. Case 2023 0065. Unless folks have questions, because I'm happy for that discussion. I have plenty of questions. This is a case where the complainant alleged that on January 24th, 2023, she and her 4 children were riding a public transportation bus, CODA, when she and another passenger got into a verbal altercation. The complainant alleges that officers were called to the scene and the responding officers were not wearing body-worn cameras. The investigation revealed that the officers were working special duty. Per the Columbus Police Division Directive 1107, a body-worn camera is not required for officers who are working special duty. The Columbus Department Inspector General concludes no officer misconduct occurred as it relates to the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed, exonerated, as the allegations are, and I don't know why this cut off. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know what the exact, or I don't know what the end of that summary is.
Officers' actions are supported by CPD policies.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And so I'm trying to make sure here. So as a subcommittee, we agree with the Department of Inspector General's recommendation. However, the subcommittee would recommend a change in policy to require a body-worn camera for officers working special duty. I think this is, again, I think we've seen a number of these cases, and so that would be our request, our recommendation. I would make a motion, and so I don't know if I can, that even counts as a motion or just, I'm just talking here, but I would make a motion to agree with the Department of Inspector General recommendation. And then the other thing about recommending a change in policy is what?
I think you just make a second motion.
Okay.
A second motion, the same thing though, and even if you want to, in it, refer back to the other times where we made that same, just a reiteration of it.
So I'd make a motion to accept the Inspector General's recommendation for case number 0065, 2023-0065.
Is there a second? Second. Awesome.
I'd make an additional motion that our subcommittee would recommend a change in policy to require body-worn camera for officers working special duty.
Okay. Seconds, any questions on 065 for Board Member Strickland? Okay.
All right, last one. 230102. The complainant alleged that on February 4th, 2023, CPD officers forcefully came into her home, which is allegation 1, and, quote, mistreated her, making her feel violated and harassed, which is allegation 2. After a review of the body-worn camera footage, as well as CPD policy and/or procedure, it is recommended that both allegations be closed with findings of, quote, unfounded. In regard to allegation 1, the complainant gave the officers consent to enter at first. The officers later obtained a search warrant to investigate further. The investigation found no evidence that the officers forcefully entered the complainant's residence or mistreated and harassed the complainant as alleged. And the subcommittee agreed with had no kind of further additional questions or concerns on that, and agreed with the recommendation of the Department of Inspector General. Would accept the recommendation of the Department of Inspector General. So that would be the motion that I would make.
Okay, so a motion in case number 102 to accept those recommendations. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any questions on those?
There's one kind of discussion point, and I will make sure this is done before our 3:30 break, but I do still want to put on the table that, no, I'll save that question for later. It's a broader policy question, but no further discussion.
So we've got 5 cases pending with motions, seconds, and an additional recommendation from the IG, and then an additional recommendation from the board. We've got first, seconds, no other discussion, I imagine. All in favor of accepting those recommendations and those motions, please raise your hands. Okay, all 5 motions pass. And with that, we will take our break 3 minutes early. We'll be back in 15. Thank
Told
you.
I could, man.
cases in which the recommendations are for agreeing. And Board Member Strickland, I'll ask, do you want to do your May cases now, or do you want to come back to them after Board Member McIntosh goes through theirs?
I'll do them now.
Awesome.
How
Thank
does
you.
that sound? Because again, this is kind of the new setup in the way that I did this and our team did this here. All right. This first one is case number 2023-0082. The complainant alleges that on January 28, 2023, he and the mother of his child were in disagreement. The complainant alleges that he called police on January 28th and 29th because the mother of his child needed to leave his residence. The complainant told the Department of Inspector General that he made 3 attempts by phone to call for police assistance and was advised by dispatch that a shooting had occurred and police would get to him when they can. The complainant stated that police never showed up at his residence, which resulted in the mother of his child leaving his apartment on foot and was allegedly raped behind a local service station. An investigation was conducted, which consisted of the following: a review of the computer-aided dispatch reports, police reports for both the shooting and shots fired on January 29, 2023, between the hours of 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., body-worn camera footage for the officers, and body-worn camera footage for the officers. The investigation revealed that during the time the complainant had called 911 for assistance, there were several reports of shots fired and shootings that had occurred. However, the investigation revealed that officers did respond to the complainant's residence on 2 occasions. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. Also, the investigation found that the officers' actions did not violate any CPD policies, procedures, and/or laws. So the allegation here in this case is for misconduct. It's that the complainant alleged that the officers did not respond to his residence after he made 3 phone calls to 911 for assistance. And the recommendation by the Department of Inspector General is unfounded. And our subcommittee had no kind of further concerns related to that particular recommendation from the Department of Inspector General. So we would make a motion to accept the Department of Inspector General recommendation of unfounded for allegation 1.
That's in case number 082. Do we have a second?
I have a question.
Yes.
One of the things that we did discuss on this, though, is about the concern about how they determine response times. You know, who gets what first. You know, and this guy called there 2 or 3 times, and still there was no response. And although they did find out that the young lady really wasn't raped, still, you know, it could have been something worse that did happen. But still, and it's my understanding from reading this that the sergeant in charge is the one that determines which responses are, going to be dealt with first. But I kind of had a problem with that because this could have been something worse than what it was. And I think that response time for him, because I can't remember what the exact time was that they actually got around to going over there, but it was a few hours later, and someone could have been dead.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So just speaking on that, and we can probably have ECC come in, but ECC, there is a policy and procedure, and that's what my investigators look at. So there is a policy out there that talks about how dispatch is supposed to prioritize the runs that come in and how they dispatch to the officers. But that is, there is a policy out there, but we could also have ECC come in and speak on that if that's something that the board would be willing to hear.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? And I'll note that all the legal specific questions, response time, speaking with youth without parent or guardian, I'm putting on the list so that when we ask Mr. Furby to come in and give a case law update, it can include those same topics.
Thank you. Move on to 230083, the complainant alleged that the responding officer was sarcastic, ridiculed her by asking unnecessary questions. The complainant was also concerned about the response time and felt that the run was not prioritized correctly. Based on the review of the evidence, the Department Inspector General concludes regarding allegation 1 that the responding officer was not sarcastic and did not ridicule the complainant or ask her unnecessary questions. The officer's actions observed were within policy, were determined to be within policy and procedures. Therefore, the Columbus Department Inspector General recommends this allegation be closed with a finding of exonerated. Regarding allegation 2, the officer was observed giving his name and badge number when requested by the complainant. Therefore, the Columbus Department Inspector General recommends this allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. In addition, the Columbus Department of Inspector General initiated a Department Inspector General allegation 1 because the Inspector General's office observed the officer using profanity that was directed toward the complainant, this being a violation of the Columbus Police Department directives. The recommendation is that this allegation be closed with a finding of sustained. So we would make a motion to accept the Department of Inspector General's allegations or recommendation of of exonerated on allegation 1 related to the officer being sarcastic, and then allegation 2 unfounded related to the allegation that the officer did not give his badge number when requested.
Okay, that's a motion on case number 083. Any seconds?
Then I would also make a motion to add a Department Inspector General initiated allegation 1 that they observed the use of profanity during a review of the officer's body-worn camera footage, which was a violation of policy and procedure, and that allegation be closed with a finding of sustained.
Do you have any
that.
seconds?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on 083? Okay, thank you. Yes.
082, I think after Mr. Strickland made the motion, before it got seconded, Board Member Tatum had a question. So I just want to make sure procedurally there was a second on the motion from Board Member Strickland on 082.
Gotcha. We'll back up to it in case we did not. Does anyone second 082? That was the response time. Thank you, Board Member Nathan.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have case number 0098. Summary. The complainant stated that an officer who arrived to assist his wife on a hit and run told him to, quote, F off, well, not the full quote here, and F you, end quote. Complainant stated that he was not being nice, but that he doesn't like the police and that the officer still should have been professional. The Columbus Department Inspector General reviewed the officer's body-worn camera footage and determined that the officer did swear, violating CPD policy. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be sustained. And so the allegation was that the officer was rude and discourteous by swearing at the complainant, and the recommendation for this is sustained. The Department of Inspector General's, we move to accept the Department of Inspector General's recommendation.
Okay, that's a motion on 098. Do I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Nathan. Any discussion or questions? Okay.
Case number 099. The complainant alleged that on February 3rd, 2023, around 7:30 a.m., an officer pulled her over and that he was very aggressive by telling her to show him her hands, telling her not to pull off and not to get out of the car. She stated that his hand was close to his gun and that she was very scared. The complainant felt that she was not being disrespectful and that she was being compliant. The Columbus Department Inspector General reviewed the body-worn camera footage of the officer and determined that the officer was not rude or aggressive when asking the complainant to take her hand out of her pocket. The officer made the comment that the complainant should stay in her car and that he would be right back with her, but was not rude or aggressive when saying so. The officer's overall demeanor and conduct was professional. Therefore, the Columbus Department Inspector General recommends a finding of exonerated be applied to allegation 1. The Department of Inspector General's recommendation is exonerated here, and our subcommittee would move to accept the recommendation of the Department of Inspector General for case number 0099.
Any seconds? Thank you, Board Member Younger. Any questions? Okay.
Case number 0111. 111. The complainant alleged, sorry, I just said a lot of ones. 0111, 3 ones. The complainant alleged that on February 3rd, 2023, after being advised that the jail could not accept the arrestee without the appropriate paperwork, the CPD officer stated that the arrestee could walk out of the front door / be let go for all he cared, as he was leaving in 2 months and didn't give an F. Now, I also just want to step back on this. We did make a note. Did we not already have this case or a similar case? And
It
so I don't
sounds
know.
like
Was it a? Yeah. So I'm not sure if this is the same case or a separate complaint or this is 011. Okay.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah. I'll keep going and we'll talk about how this is in it here. After review of all the obtained evidence, it is recommended that the allegation be closed with a finding of sustained. The investigation revealed that the officer did make the alleged comments and that the comments violated several CPD policies. Our notes here was like, this seems similar to a case we previously discussed. I don't know if you want us to hold on this or what, or
If, I would say this, Nate, if you're able to find it, we can hold open, I would say not to make a motion on it yet unless we can confirm that it's different. It's also very possible that it is a different case. Maybe the same officer, maybe 2 officers set to retire at the same time. So maybe we pause on whether we make a motion so that way it's not included in the batch, and then once we can confirm if it's different, that we can move forward on it. My assumption is you agree with the recommendation of sustained, right? Okay.
this is true.
Okay,
There's a clerical error, so apologies.
Okay.
It's already been decided.
awesome.
Already been
Thank
decided,
you.
folks.
We heard this one already.
Got it. All right, well,
Glad I wasn't going crazy.
don't count that against my time here. All right.
Read all that stuff again.
0, at least it shows we're reading our cases.
Yeah, we remembered. Yeah,
Folks.
absolutely.
This case is 0119. The summary, the complainant alleged that on February 3rd, 2023, she was involved in a car accident and the responding officer failed to call an ambulance for her. After review of the body-worn camera footage as well as CPD policy and or procedure, it is recommended that the allegation be closed with a finding of exonerated, as the officer believed that he appropriately determined if there were any injuries / if a medic was needed. The investigation did, however, reveal one policy violation outside of the allegation made when the officer did not turn on his body-worn camera footage for the first half of the run. It is recommended that this additional allegation be closed with a finding of sustained. So our subcommittee would recommend a motion to accept the Department Inspector General recommendation of exonerated on allegation 1 regarding the first allegation about the officer failing to call an ambulance, and then, on case number 0119.
Any seconds? Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
I would also like to make a motion to add the Department Inspector General allegation 1 of sustained related to the investigation revealing that the officer did not turn on his body-worn camera footage for the first half of the run, which is a policy violation.
Any seconds?
And that's towards case number 0119.
Okay, just to be clear, who seconded? Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions on that? All right, thank you.
Case number 0121, the complainant alleged that she contacted the police on January 18th, 2023, so that a report could be completed documenting an incident that occurred with her neighbor, who she has a protection order against. However, the complainant reported that she was advised that no report had been completed, which impacted her ability to pursue charges. After review of the body-worn camera footage and CPD policies, it is recommended that the allegation that the officer did not complete an incident report be closed with a finding of, quote, exonerated, end quote, as the officer did not complete a report, but not doing so did not violate CPD policy and/or procedure. And this is case 121. I just want to try to pull up the exact language here. Okay, just so I want to further go into this, so that the complainant stated that she wanted that while the officer was not required by CPD policy to complete an incident report, and the complainant stated that she wanted the incident documented, and it was documented by the CAD report, it is concluded that the officer did not violate any policy, CPD policy, procedure, and/or law here. Our subcommittee agreed with the recommendation of exonerated here. And I do have a question, just generally, not necessarily dispositive for this particular case, is that kind of the difference between it being documented through the CAD report versus documented specifically with an incident report, if there's any sort of difference there, or it's still documented, basically. That's just a.
So there's a difference. The CAD report is an automated report. So like when a cruiser gets activated to go on a run, you hear the officers on the walkie, like all of that information kind of gets recorded automatically. So it's not necessarily an intentional act to document a report. And then an incident report is literally the officer interviewing, writing down step by step what happened in a particular incident when responding to something. So there is a difference there.
Yep. And then just it's not in the high level summary here, but the reason we agreed with the recommendation is it talks about the officer noted in this case it was a civil matter, not a criminal matter, and then made the recommendation that she could speak to a judge about this or the court for this particular incident. So we would move ahead with accepting the Department of Inspector General's recommendation of exonerated for case number 0121.
Do we have a second? Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Okay. Not including case number 0014, because this is a case in which we disagreed with the recommendation, so I'll save that to the other slot. This now, we're going to move on to case 0174. The complainant alleged that on February 18th, 2023, the officer, quote, smacked, end quote, the back of his truck, which resulted in a dent. After review of all the obtained evidence, it is recommended that the allegation be closed with a finding of exonerated for the officer. Although the officer did dent the complainant's truck, there were several mitigating factors present that resulted in the Columbus Department Inspector General concluding that the incident did not rise to the level of misconduct. And the specifics around this particular case, just so that folks know at a high level, was that there was an officer that was redirecting traffic due to a car accident, and an ambulance was coming, and so the officer, I think, the officer was trying to move somebody over and created and led to this dent. And based on the review of the full case, the review of evidence here, those were the mitigating factors that were determined to suggest that while the dent did occur, this incident did not rise to the level of misconduct. Our subcommittee agreed with that recommendation or with that finding. So we would move to accept the Department of Inspector General's recommendation of exonerated on allegation 1 for case number 0174.
Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Case number 0194, the complainant alleged that the officers, quote, illegally arrested, end quote, and then parentheses, detained, her minor son when taking him off his school bus. After a review of the body-worn camera footage and CPD policies and procedures, it is recommended that the allegation be closed with a finding of exonerated for the officer. The investigation revealed that while conducting an investigation, an officer did remove the complainant's son from the school bus and detain him for a short period of time, which did not violate CPD policy, procedure, and/or law. No other acts of misconduct were observed throughout the investigation. So this was a case in which there was a 911 call alleging that there was a stolen vehicle, and they called regarding somebody they believed to be a suspect that they alleged was running to get onto a bus, onto a school bus, and when the officers took that, several officers responded, and they went on to the bus to search for this potential suspect, and they responded to the run. They entered the school bus, and they asked questions about was anybody limping, because one of the alleged suspects was limping, and then they said that somebody had matched the description of the suspect, and so they asked this individual to step off the bus, and they looked into this situation further, and there were several kind of questions that were happening about this particular case. And one of, ultimately the witness, and then they asked the caller whether they could positively ID the complainant's son as being the suspect. And the caller was not able to get a good look at the suspect's face, only his clothing. And so due to this, the officers held the school bus and said that the complainant's son would be released to go back to the school and back on the bus, and the son was released. So we had some general questions. Just was one, just the notes we made, was it necessary to handcuff the student in this situation? And then one of the pieces here that made us kind of okay in terms of where the recommendation goes is that the report indicates that this incident had allegedly already been looked into by the officer's chain of command due to multiple individuals reaching out to CBD personnel directly about the incident. So I don't know if, I don't want to, put anybody on the spot, but that was a note that was made. And so in those particular circumstances, how do you all handle those cases that just kind of go into the rest of the evidence there?
I apologize, I may be lost with the question that you're asked, but we were aware that the case was brought to the attention of CPD. However, with this being a citizen complaint involving this is the reason why when it came to us, we would do the investigation. We would look at any additional evidence that might have been done with another investigation. If they were looking into criminality, we would see if that case was closed first before we would look at it. But no, in this case, everything that we were able to find, along with the fact that the bus was being followed by the person who made the allegation. So when the police arrived, the person was actually following the bus that they saw the person get on.
Yep. And so, yeah, and so we, the one thing I did want to make a note of here is just not necessarily immediately to be discussed, but on the list of things here in terms of, was it necessary in this particular situation to handcuff the student, and handling how you would handle a minor in this particular situation was something that we discussed as a subcommittee, wanted to make note of. As the recommendation itself, again, based on the body worn camera footage and CPD policies, the investigation revealed that there were no acts of misconduct observed during this time, and that the officer's actions were not a violation of CPD policy, procedure, and/or law. So we would accept that recommendation for case number 0194. That's my motion.
All right, thank you. That's moved. Is there a second? All right, any other discussion or questions? All right, we have 8 pending motions and seconds from Team 2, including 1 additional complaint that was sustained in case number 119. If there's no further discussion, can everyone who would agree with those recommendations and motions please raise your hand or say aye? All right, motions carry. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Oh, yes.
I did check, so case 0111, that was already approved.
Okay, thank you. And so you all have 1 case on which you disagree. We'll save that for after we hear from Board Member McIntosh. Any agreed cases?
Okay, so I'm going to start with case number 23-0001. Let me go over the allegations. The complainant alleged that the officer refused to identify herself. Allegation 2, the complainant alleged that the officer threatened to detain him. 3, the complainant alleged the officer threatened to shoot his dog. And 4, the complainant alleged the officer refused to call for a sergeant when requested. So a review of that body-worn camera, the officer's body-worn camera, the investigator came up with, the officer went to the location to check on the well-being of a young lady. That request was made by her mother. Young lady was staying with her boyfriend, who was allegedly abusive towards her. Upon arrival, the officer is greeted by the boyfriend, the complainant. The officer requests to speak with the young lady. The boyfriend becomes defensive, very uncooperative, asking questions such as, is there a warrant? Is this a well-being check? And can he speak with the supervisor? He also became very animated and yelled at the officer. The officer tried to de-escalate this person's actions and also requested the assistance of another officer. Boyfriend finally goes in and gets his girlfriend. The officer spoke with the girlfriend. She assured the officer that she was okay. The boyfriend, meanwhile, interfered with their conversation and started a short argument with his girlfriend. The officer again tried to calm the boyfriend down, who was hostile and calls the officer pathetic. The boyfriend then appears with his dog, to which the officer asks if he would please put the dog away. He refuses and would not close the door. The officer advises the boyfriend that if that dog, and this is a quote, if that dog comes outside in an aggressive manner, I will do what I have to do to make sure that I don't get hurt. Eventually, the girlfriend again assures the officer that she is okay and that she wants to go back inside. And so the boyfriend then contacted the IG and filed those 4 complaints. The complaint, on the first allegation, the complainant alleged that the officer refused to identify herself. She was never asked to identify herself. Allegation number 2, the complainant alleged the officer threatened to detain him. The officer simply asked the dispatcher for assistance of another officer. Allegation number 4, I read you that quote. The complainant alleged the officer threatened to shoot his dog. And allegation number 4, the complainant alleged the officer refused to call for the sergeant when requested. The complainant asked to speak with the sergeant in the very beginning. The officer did not refuse. I think that was him being initially uncooperative. So I recommend that we concur with the IG's findings of allegation 1, unfounded, and allegation 2, 3, and 4, exonerated for case number 23-0001.
Do we have a second? Thank you. Any questions?
Yep. What was the determination from the investigators regarding allegation 3,
Allegation 3,
just in terms of how they explained why
Okay.
they came to that conclusion?
I'm going to turn to that. The one about the dog.
Yeah.
I'll just read it to you. The allegation that the officer threatened to shoot the dog was observed as an exaggeration by the complainant. The officer requested that the complainant put the dog away. The complainant refused. The officer stated, in fact, if the dog comes outside in an aggressive manner, I will do what I have to do to make sure I don't get hurt. The officer's response was due to the complainant's refusal to put the dog away. And that's why they came about with that allegation. Good. All right, case number 23-002. Allegation 1, the complainant alleged.
Sorry, is that 002 or 022?
I'm sorry, 0022.
Okay.
Yep. Complainant alleged that the officer threatened him by stating he would make the complainant's house a project. The complainant also alleged that the officer called him a liar multiple times during their verbal exchange when trying to provide the officer with information. So basically, officers were sent to a location to investigate a possible stolen trailer, called in by this complainant's neighbor. Upon arrival, the officer makes contact with the complainant. The complainant claims that he has information that the trailer belongs to a friend. At some point during their interaction, the officer states that he would make the house a project and later called the complainant a liar because he didn't provide the officer with the correct info of the supposed owner of the trailer. A review of that officer's BWC by the investigator shows that the officer did, in fact, make those statements and admitted to making those statements. So I recommend that we agree with the IG's findings of sustained for both allegations. And I think it was also recommended that it's sent over and reviewed by the chief of police for possible disciplinary action. Case number 23-0022.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Okay.
All right. Case number 23-0027. The complaint stated that the officer drew his weapon when instructing her to put her hands up. The complainant stated that her hands were on the steering wheel and there was no reason for the officer to draw his weapon for a traffic stop. basically what happened, the complainant runs a red light, 2 motorcycle officers are in pursuit of her. One officer stops her. He's making approach to her vehicle. He sees that her right hand is on her steering wheel. Her left hand, he can't see it. He asks her to see her other hand, to show her other hand. She didn't comply. He asked her again. She didn't comply. He unholsters his weapon. She complies, and then he proceeds to approach the vehicle. So this one was more or less she didn't understand that that's what officers do in that circumstance because it's unsafe to approach otherwise. So the conclusion is that the officer was exonerated, and I move that we agree with the IG's findings of exonerated in case number 23-0027.
Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
And let's take a look at case number 22-0556. So this one was kudos to the investigator because this one was kind of long and it was confusing. So I'll narrow it down. 2 allegations. The complainant alleges that officers arrived at her residence with their guns drawn and ordered everyone out of the home. Allegation number 2, the complainant alleged officers were rude by telling her granddaughter to shut up. So earlier that morning, the complainant called CPD to report that her rear license plate was stolen off of her. She has a silver Jeep Liberty. Unbeknownst to her and near her residence, officers were also looking for a wanted felon. And they had saw this wanted felon earlier, and he was standing by a red Pontiac, I think it was, but he was also standing beside a silver Jeep Liberty. Sometimes when people steal license plates, they also put those license plates back on a vehicle similar to the one they stole it from. At any rate, the felon flees. Now, later on, so we're going to fast forward. She made a report 11:30 in the morning. We're at 11 at night now. Officers come upon that silver Jeep Liberty, but it's actually hers. They're thinking it's from earlier where they saw the wanted felon, and that he possibly took that silver Jeep Liberty and now he's there and he's inside this house. So the officers get the grandmother and the daughter outside. Guns are out, of course, and then they finally figured out. Now, remember, the rear tag was not on that vehicle. Maybe they got a little excited, the officers. Running that VIN number would have shown that not the vehicle was stolen, but the rear license plate. But at any rate, so the officers did get him out of the house. And we actually agreed with the IG's findings. We agreed with the findings. Now, the second allegation of the officer being rude to the granddaughter, I think that was unfounded because the video shows that he was not. And in fact, he didn't tell her to shut up. What he said was, I think she made a comment, and he said, stop. He was telling her to stop with the comment. So they were trying to do a good job. Unfortunately, maybe going a little fast, they pulled persons out of their home, and we looked at it as, what if it were us? Depending on what I was doing, right, in my house. So a person could have been asleep, a person could have been cooking dinner, could have had company over, whatever, and being pulled out of the house with guns out. So certainly I would have been upset too. Sometimes I think where we go wrong is, instead of first trying to justify, we have to first sincerely apologize. And that, a lot of times, de-escalates the situation, and now we can explain why we did what we did. We weren't trying to be malicious, we were just trying to do our jobs. And I think that's where that kind of went awry. You have to sincerely apologize first. If you're just starting to just try to justify, that doesn't usually de-escalate that situation. So,
What was the exact, what was the finding? I'm just trying to get a sense.
okay, the finding, let's see, Kai.
Sorry, I know it was a long.
Yeah. Exonerated for the first one, I'm sure, and unfounded for the second one, where the officer was supposedly rude to the granddaughter.
What was the first allegation exactly? I'm just sorry.
First allegation was, the complainant alleges officers arrived at their residence with their guns drawn and ordered everyone out of the house. And that, in fact, happened.
And then the language used by the investigator as to their justification as to why they said exonerated, without obviously going to all the.
Or how about if their reasoning behind that was because, in fact, they thought that that wanted felon was in that residence based on that stolen vehicle, which was actually a stolen license plate. So that was a justification because, in fact,
So a
they were trying to
mistaken
arrest.
part of an investigation doesn't negate, like, it doesn't make that's why it's exonerated, because
Yeah.
it's still not an unlawful investigation.
Correct.
It just turned out to be wrong, which
Yes.
is not a violation, being wrong is not a violation of policy.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And that's why we kind of discuss it amongst ourselves, and I think we all,
So maybe I'll save my question or discussion for discussion. I don't know. But
go ahead.
yeah, can I say it now or
Oh, say it
talk now? Yeah, I mean, to me, there's not a policy or practice. I mean, because this could have ended it could have been even a worse situation based on this mistake that was made initially. And so I don't know if it's general practice to for this to happen, so this doesn't happen, or if there needs to be a policy or something, because it seems concerning to me that, while, it seems to be indicated here that this is a mistake, and I mean, that's, that could have led to a really problematic situation, and also leads to another point regarding allegation 2 in terms of how the complainant felt about how this situation was handled. And so on both of those fronts, I don't necessarily know if I agree with this recommendation here by the Department Inspector General, but I also just want some clarity here on either policy or how the investigator made that determination, because it's not so clear to me that exonerated or unfounded makes sense based on the facts that as I've heard them.
So they didn't just come to that conclusion that this person may be in there. Remember earlier, well, number one, the license plate was stolen. Earlier, they had saw that wanted felon, and he was beside a red Pontiac, but he was also beside a silver Jeep Liberty, which is the same description of the lady who made the report that her license plate was stolen, right?
So, but But didn't you also say that if you run VIN number, or if you did that, you
But-
wouldn't have?
Yeah, but see, so that's in their mind too, the silver Jeep Liberty. And the suspect that they're looking for was beside that. It was also said that silver Jeep Liberty was stolen, when in fact the silver Jeep Liberty wasn't stolen, the license plate was stolen. So that's up there. So when they get there, so you got to take into consideration when they get there, you know, you don't always have, especially when I'm assuming that Jeep Liberty is right in front of that house. They don't have necessarily time to get that VIN number and then try to get this one it fell into. So I wish they would have, or I wish somebody would have caught it earlier, that it was her vehicle, it was her license plate that was stolen. And then it wouldn't have come to this. And this was over a period of time. And they were hearing this stuff over the radio. Now, the person that took the report, he knew. They knew. But the other officers that were not only looking for this guy, and specifically looking for this guy, they were hearing this stuff go over the radio about this Jeep Liberty. Well, they see a Jeep Liberty, and they see the plate. They were kind of maybe rushing. The plate wasn't on the back of it. They thought that was the stolen Jeep Liberty. They also heard in those different transactions, they heard that address.
Yeah, and to me, this sounds like a breakdown somewhere along the way, and so it's concerning that either maybe this isn't a policy violation or that there isn't a policy or practice in place to make sure that this does not happen. I mean, because, you know, what's the circumstance of this happening again in a different situation and this circumstance ending tragically? So that's a concern on my end. I know Member Younger had a question, but I just want to.
Actually, it wasn't a question.
Or a comment.
I see what you're saying, Kyle, and we spent, and maybe the Inspector General can also, we spent so much time talking about this case when the three of us reviewed it. And I was thankful that we had Mac there because of his being a police officer. I mean, he shed so much light on this, so much insight into this. And the thing is, sometimes it's just the aligning of the planets. And it seems like this was what kind of situation that it was.
But I mean,
I don't know that sometimes, no matter how many laws you have there and how many precautions you take, things just happen, and it's nobody's fault.
But I mean, I think it's predictable that to me, it's not an aligning of the planets type of incident, because I feel like this could happen again or has happened elsewhere, versus kind of an aligning of the planets. It's something that's not at all foreseeable. Or, well, you scientists, obviously, you can foresee all that. But in terms of this particular instance, while I understand that, and to me, maybe I just don't know enough about the types of policy there, but just even the point around the VIN number, those types of things makes me wonder, at the very least, what can be done about this particular situation. So that was my. I haven't spent the time with the subcommittee as you all debated and discussed it, but I'm not sure if others on the board have comments or if the IG's office has further to add there. But that was just my.
Well, and I feel if I could just interject briefly, it feels very similar to the Fourth Amendment case we just heard a little bit earlier, the exigent circumstances, which I'm assuming if you, even wrongly, suspect that there is a person who has active warrants and even wrongly think that they are in this home, I can see how the action of pulling out the inhabitants of the home fits within that. Even if let's say someone was arrested out of that circumstance, I could see that fitting within that exigent circumstance, the same thing that happened when we're actively pursuing someone, they run into the house. I agree that those situations can go bad quickly, but I also understand why in and of itself, what happened was not a policy violation. I think this could also fit within what Mr. Furby can tell us when it comes to, because this is now the second case, even this afternoon, where that type of authority of, like, where does the barrier lie when a search is happening, should be a topic that we visit and ask for just updated case law on.
So, and then there's allegation 2, which is,
That the officer was rude to the granddaughter and told her to shut up. And so that didn't happen. But let me go back on the
Okay.
precautions. So maybe they could have been more cautious on the front end, but certainly on the back end when they pulled out the mother, the grandmother and the granddaughter, they certainly took precautions doing that. So it's sometimes, Kyle, those things are just going to happen.
I would, yeah, thank you. I don't know, I would be interested in just further, and I know I don't want to put the Department Inspector General's office on the spot, but just, further, to me, I'm not quite, I need a little bit more here.
Or maybe this. How about this? So I gave a brief. This thing was thick, and that's why I gave kudos to the investigator, because he spelled it out and he hit it. So maybe just you reading this in its entirety will give you what you need.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that I'd be more comfortable with that. I know, obviously, you don't have to do that, but I do think, given this particular case and given the circumstances around it, I'd be more comfortable with some more time before moving forward on a vote for this particular case.
Well, I'll leave that to Board Member McIntosh. If you'd like to move forward with putting your motion together, I will entertain it. If you'd like to wait to give Board Member Strickland or whomever else would like to read the report, you can hold off, because you all will have, I know this because Mary told me in the break, 3 of your cases we're not going to get to today because Mark was going to be the reciter. And so those 3 cases of yours from this month are also going to have to go to July. So if you want to keep that.
We'll keep that.
Until
Appreciate
then.
that.
Yep.
The only thing that I would note is that these are the ones where there was agreement by all members of the committee.
Yes.
To bring them forward. That doesn't mean it requires a unanimous approval vote. It could be 5-1. So, but out of courtesy to the other board member, if they request additional opportunity to review, that's certainly acceptable, if that's what you want to do.
IG Hendrickson.
Add, which may give you clarification, is we know that in this case, in investigation, we found that the officers did not violate policy or procedures. One of our biggest concerns was whether or not the officers even had probable cause or reasonable suspicion. And what you'll find is that on page 11, down at the bottom, we did seek a legal opinion from our counsel regarding this, because we, again, wanted just another set of legal eyes on this to let us know. And so there is a legal opinion footnoted, and we just put the whole entirety. So maybe that might help you understand the clarification that also, just kind of supported what our conclusion was in this.
Thank you for that. All right, so we're withholding that. We do have open motions on the floor for 3, and then I believe Board Member Younger, you're reciting
The next 3.
the next 3. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Case number 2023-0057. This is a misconduct case. The facts are the complainant alleges that information provided to him as to the traffic accident that occurred on 12/24/2022 was not correct. It caused insurance problems for him. Also, the officer did not cite the other driver nor write a formal report. The IG reviewed CAD, BWC, and the unit history for the incident. And upon all of this review, the officer, they found that the officer went through and verified all the information as to both drivers by obtaining their driver's license, running them through the system per CPD policy, took much time with the other driver and with both drivers. Officer made sure that the complaining witness could read his writing, asked him that. He also told him that he would update all information in the CAD data. where he could obtain any additional information. The notes in the CAD data were very clear as to who was at fault. The officer was not required to write a report because of lack of injuries and minimal damage. And also, he asked the complaining witness if he wanted a report, and he stated he did not want the report on the BWC. So, the other driver was uninsured, and this was the issue here. There is no system for officers to verify whether a policy is valid or not, and this was the other driver was upset because the insurance policy wasn't valid. But that's not the officer's job, nor can he verify it. They can match the info given to the registration and expiration date, which the officer did do this. Officer did all that he could, what was allowable, which was available to him. The finding of the IG was exonerated as to both allegations here. And the two allegations were that the information on the exchange form was incorrect and that he did not complete a report. Our committee agreed with the Inspector General here. Our committee moves to accept the findings of the Inspector General as to case number 2023-0057.
Can I have a second? Any questions?
This is a different case than the one that Board Member Nathan was talking about. It just seemed similar. Was this another case where there wasn't a requirement for the exchange of information or to verify that?
This is slightly different.
Okay,
Because of the insurance and it sounds different. What do you think?
We've had
one-
several, yeah.
We've had several
Like that? Okay.
Yep.
That's just something to note of, just generally. Thanks.
Second case, 2023-0061. This is,
Yes, it was moved.
oh, I'm sorry, did you already?
No,
do that?
Nate asked if it was motioned, it was.
Okay. 2023-0061. This is a misconduct, rude, and profanity. Facts. The complaining witness was interviewed by the IG, and he was concerned because his daughter was involved in a dispute with a known female high school student, other high school students, and it escalated to property damage. There was kicking in of the front door of his home, slashing of tires, and these were all reports of prior incidences that were taken. The last incident and the incident at issue here was the breaking of a windshield of his daughter's boyfriend's car in the early morning hours. So that's the thing at issue here. He heard the breaking. He was in his home, the complaining witness. He heard the breaking of the window. And this was at 2 a.m. So he got up and went outside of his residence, called the police, and he wanted the police to intervene. But what he did was he advised that he should. He drove to the address of the individuals that he thought committed this act, and he wanted the police to meet him there. The IG investigated. They obtained CAD, BWC of the officer involved, and when the officer, so what the BWC showed was that when the officer got there, this gentleman who went to this home at 2 a.m. in the morning after hearing the broken window, greeted the officers with profanity, etc. He wanted to confront the parents, and he wanted the officers to be present while he confronted the parents. It revealed that when the officer arrived, the officer indicated that he shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have gone there. He was asked by the female, there were two officers, he was asked by the female officer to lower his voice and stop using profanity, which he did do. And he was told not to confront individuals at their home at 2 a.m. in the morning, and the male, and then the complaining witness started to use profanity towards both officers again. Officers wanted, he wanted these individuals interviewed. The officers declined interviews, but the male officers, the officer, excuse me here, the male officer said, I don't F with any of you, you ain't, and more for profanity, and the officer repeated the profanity. And the officer repeated, okay, then stop effing with us and get in your car and leave. And the complaining witness did exactly that. And the finding was, as to allegation 1, the male officer, let me tell you about allegation 1 here. The male officer used profanity towards him. And the allegation 1, he was exonerated because he did not use profanity. He repeated the profanity that the complaining witness used. And this particular officer also used de-escalation techniques. He took a report, which he didn't really, he took the report just to appease this individual. He maintained calm per the per the body-worn camera, and he stayed calm through a barrage of cussing. And per the directives, he did remain very professional, except in that repetition of what the individual had said. As to the female officer, it's unfounded because she was not disrespectful at all. She simply asked him to tone it down and stop cussing, and he did. The recommendation of the IG was that exonerated and unfounded. Our committee agrees with the IG. The recommendation of the IG was that the male officer not be advised not to repeat language that is disrespectful and that would reflect negatively on the Columbus Division of Police. And our subcommittee agrees, and we move to accept the findings of the IG and the recommendation of the Inspector General as to the male officer as it relates to case number 2023-0061.
Is there a second? Second. Any other questions?
Now, was that one motion or two motions? Because did the IG give?
Yeah, was that a Department Inspector General initiated allegation, or was that just a recommendation? I'm confused about that.
It was
It was part of the original complaint,
yeah,
because profanity was one of the allegations.
Okay, so
Yeah.
two allegations.
thank you.
So profanity, did they sustain or exonerate, or I'm just.
It's exonerated because he repeated
He repeated what the person
what the
said.
person had,
Say
go
it
ahead.
again.
And we had a similar case as well, where complainant was saying lots of profanity to the officer, and so the officer kind of sarcastically repeated it back and said, sure, I'll get the F out of here.
Yeah.
And the recommendation was similar. It was an exoneration because it wasn't a violation of policy, because the officer didn't initiate cursing at the person, but there was advice that just be careful and don't repeat that.
Thank you for that. So like the advice, there's advice there, but it's not a policy violation, so, I mean, what's the, yeah.
You're correct. We had this come up once before, where if the officer's exonerated, then there should not be a recommendation to, like, train or to admonish the officer if they've been exonerated for the behavior. So this would be more a recommendation to, like, look at the policy or provide some additional training in general, not for this specific officer. So I do agree, there should be an initial motion for the exoneration, and I believe the second count was unfounded. A motion and a second on that, and then if you want secondarily to do a motion based on the IG's recommendation to forward to the Division of Police some opinion about officers not repeating cursing, profanity, if the suspect is doing that, or if the parties they're interacting with are cursing, not to repeat what they're saying.
Yeah, that's
Do that separately.
And that's helpful. And then is that I'm just generally, is that like a practice or within policy? Because you all made the determination that that's not a violation. And so,
Yeah, but it could be seen as a violation by him repeating that.
Yeah.
You know, and all they're saying is they're making a recommendation that the police do not make that a practice, because it could be seen as a violation.
but you all determined it's not a violation? Or is that,
It,
it was unfounded, or?
Right, just based on the facts of the case, meaning that when we look at the policy, the officer's conduct usually is towards the complainant as them initiating their conversation of using profanity towards the complainant. In this case, the complainant had made a statement to the officer, and the officer who was leaving the scene just repeated what the complainant saying, yes, I'm gonna blanket leave. And so we still felt that, and even talking to the officer, it's just not best practice, and it's just, in our case, we just felt that since he did not initiate the words and him repeating, it just was not best practice, so.
Yeah, and so I understand that. I'm a little concerned if that is the standard, or because, they could have repeated something else that could have, rise the level of some sort of
We had a case in our pile, where the people were cussing these police officers out, but they didn't in return say what the person said. They just said what was in their spirit to say, and they started blah, 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 blah. And now they were in violation of policy.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. Maybe a second recommendation to maybe, I don't know, around that policy, but,
the recommendation can't be towards this specific officer because there's a motion, well, there will be a motion for exoneration. It would just be, hey, take a look at this and see if maybe you want to change anything or give some different information or advice to officers.
All right.
Board Member Younger, would you just like to amend your initial motion?
Yeah, let me start. So I'm going to do two separate motions. Correct?
Well, or you already moved. I think what you can do is just amend it to take out the portion about the advice.
Yeah.
And instead, we can include a second motion.
All right. All right. As to case number 2023-0061, we would move to amend the prior motion, and as to the advice given to this specific officer in this case who repeated the profanity, and we would move to review repeating profanity made by the public with all officers, or as a matter of,
You just want to rescind that part of your initial motion. Just amend the initial motion to rescind the part about the advice, and then just make that under a separate motion.
okay. So as to case number 2023-0061, I would rescind the part that indicates the advice as to the male officer and to the alleged profanity, and the profanity that he repeated in this particular case. That works. Okay. Now,
You can second that one first.
okay,
The
let's
second, great,
do
thank
that
you.
one. Okay. Now, what I want to do is what the Inspector General did here. but not as to the individual officer. At this time, as to case number 2023-0061, we would move to have the chief of police review the policy as it relates to CPD officers repeating profanity that has been made by the public, and so that it doesn't reflect badly on the Columbus Division of Police.
Okay, so we've got a motion that is related to 061, but it is a general policy motion to look at the policy about profanity as it relates to repeating what others have said. Do I have a second? Second. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that could hopefully go in the category of the other ones that we talked about, just to get more follow-up on in terms of why a particular policy is crafted the way it is. But that's one thing I just want to make a note to see if we can get follow-up on that particular instance. Thanks.
Now,
another one,
my
right.
third one is, we don't agree, is not
It's
an
a disagree?
agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take this moment to look at the 5 cases recited by Team 3 in which there was agreement. There are open motions on the floor for 5 cases. We're reserving voting on 1, and we will hear the remaining 3 in July. All in favor of accepting those 5 as the motions currently stand, please raise your hands. All right, thank you. Those motions carry. All right, we have 6 minutes to go over cases on which we disagree, or we will hear whatever we don't get through at our July meeting. And looking forward at the case assignments, we have half as many cases in July as we had for this month, so I don't anticipate it'll be a problem to get through those. Famous last words. All right, so turning back to Team 2, would you like to go over 2023-0154? That's the case number, right? For
Yeah.
the case in which you disagree?
Yeah, the complainant, this is case number 0154. The complainant alleged that on February 10, 2023, CPD officers were on guard duty when with a patient under arrest at Grant Medical Center. The complainant alleged that an officer showed a nurse a video that had been posted to YouTube of the patient being shot. He alleged that the nurse believed the video was too loud and the officer showing the video too close in proximity to the patient. The nurse indicated it was inappropriate as the patient had just gone through a traumatic experience and shouldn't have to relive it. It was further alleged that the call button was moved across the room and away from the patient, which the nurse believed was unsafe. The Columbus Department Inspector General followed up with the complainant and obtained a statement from the nurse who advised him of the allegation. The Department Inspector General also interviewed with both officers that were assigned to guard duty for this assignment and determined that the officer who was identified as the focus was within CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that both allegations be closed with a finding of exonerated. Our subcommittee disagreed with this recommendation from the Department of Inspector General regarding allegation 1, which is the allegation that the officer showed the complainant a YouTube video of the patient being shot, which she believed was inappropriate. Our understanding of this, based on the facts and circumstances before us and what was provided, was that these officers' actions seemed to have risen to the level of misconduct, and we would recommend allegation 1 be sustained. I did also want to make a note that in the actual report itself, and again, this is 0154, that the report in a portion of this referred to the patient as, quote, prisoner in the summary. I think the report should just refer to the patient as patient in this particular report. So there's a number of other circumstances that were part of this situation, but again, we found that showing a YouTube video to a nurse regarding the patient being shot nearby that patient, we believed it was just inappropriate action and rise to the level of misconduct and should be a policy violation, or seems to be a policy violation there. So we would not accept the Department of Inspector General's recommendation in this particular instance.
And, yes,
Member Strickland, do you have a policy that?
that's what I was going to ask.
Okay.
Is there a policy under which you want to make the recommendation? If you recall back a few meetings ago, when Laura Baker Morris was here from the city attorney's office, talking about specifically tying to, because that'll be an issue that pops up when the discipline recommendation attaches to that officer, which city policy or rule you'd like it to fall
I
under.
personally think we could go back to that one that they use all the time, was that Directive 1.15 or 1.01 or whatever it is, where, it deals with the actions of public officials or something like that? Because to me, this was just totally inappropriate for them to show that video of an individual being shot, and act like, it was an air of jocularity that they were doing it, it didn't show any sensitivity at all, and I just personally took offense to it, but we've got that, I could probably look it up, whatever that one is, that we, work rules.
And then in this particular instance, I think the policy, it's maybe policy 101, rule of conduct. In this particular instance, the nurse who filed the complaint said that she believed what was happening was inappropriate, or she or he or they believed that what was happening was inappropriate. And so that was just related to allegation 1. And so I don't know if I believe that's policy 101, rule of conduct.
And 1.15.
And 1.15 general requirements. And happy to, further discuss and if we want to hold this for next time, but that is something that, based on our review, we could hold, just like the other one we could hold, and for further discussion for the rest of the board
I don't know if we
members.
need to hold it if you're making the motion, and I think unless anybody
Yeah,
else has any.
Yeah, I don't know. But that was based on this, we can go into it, but the officer was playing the YouTube video.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
But
okay.
you want to make the motion for recommending discipline under Rule 1.01 and Rules 1.15 of the Code of Conduct.
We would recommend however the language would be in terms of the board in this instance, that the allegation 1 is sustained for a violation of Police Rule 101.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, does it make sense to hold and have further conversation? I just want to make sure that we're
Unless
clear.
anybody, I was
Okay.
going to say, are the other members prepared to vote based on hearing the allegation?
The other option you have is based on the discourse here at the meeting today. You could vote to refer it back to the IG with the additional information that you've provided through the discourse today for further examination and determination whether she wants to amend the report or not. The IG doesn't have to do
Yeah.
that, but that's one thing you could do, or you could potentially move forward and.
Yeah, and the reason I say that is because I don't. And I know we've trying to get this forward in terms of how the board moves things forward here, but in this particular circumstance, if we believe there to be a policy violation here, and then we present that to and that's referred on to the police chief. I don't know where the IG might be like, well, that's not us. That was the board.
Well, we're still one unit, though. Like, so at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's our recommendation that goes to the chief or the director of public safety. And we do have the ability to say, we just think it should be sustained. And that's fine. And it's no, critique on the IG's office or no love lost, but we can absolutely do that. And then that, just like any of our other recommendations, becomes a thing that chain of command then looks at.
Right,
So-
because the chain of command is going to do their own
regardless, yeah.
work regardless. And so I would caution against making your own finding of using the terminology that the IG used, unfounded, substantiated, or I would just say you'd move to disagree with or not adopt the recommendation of the IG, but still forward it on to the chief of police and the director of public safety for follow-up.
And I think you can include, and if you'd like to, Board Member Strickland, just for sake of time, I think you can rescind the use of the word sustain and instead say, we'd like to refer for discipline or
So I think I
additional
want to hold on this. I think I want to hold on this and maybe refer back for further examination with the IG's office. And
The IG could even provide further explanation today as to rationale. The only
Yeah.
caution also would be if you're going to refer it back, just be mindful of the
The
time frame.
timeframe.
The time frame.
yeah.
Okay. With that note, then we will hold that. We are beyond time, so I'm going to go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn. I will note, though, we will start the July meeting with the update from the Inspector General so that we are not skipping all of those. Yes.
Without, I know that we want to end the meeting, but would we be able to, we asked before if the chief or one of his representatives would be here. I'm particularly interested in hearing a report regarding what's happening with our recommendations.
Yep. Nate actually got some of our recommendations back just today. So the hope is to be able to get through those and have those be on the July agenda too. I also have notes on the agenda to hopefully hear from Director Bashotti from Public Safety. If not the chief, then have someone come and talk about some of the BWC policies and all the other notes that things we've brought up to connect with the city attorney's office about those topics as well. Yep.
Channel the inner Janet Jackson and indicate you could have 2 meetings in 1 month because there's no way you're going to get through all the complaint reviews.
And I will channel her and say, not in July. So that we will not do.
Fair enough.
But I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. A second. Awesome. All in favor, please raise your hands.
Great.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.